I don't know how your challenge went this week. I had a conversation with a few of you about your commutes and how difficult it may have been not to listen to the radio or a podcast. And every week during this series, we're challenging ourselves to get to know people. And last week I said, I don't want you to just know people, I want you to know God. So I said, turn your radio off on your way to work. And some of the people in my small group, they said, it was hard and I couldn't listen to podcasts or music, and I prayed. And when I ran out of prayer, I turned on my Bible app and I started listening to God's word. And some of them started in John, because we said, man, just start in John if you don't know where to start. And they talked about how good it was to hear about these verses they knew by heart, John 3 in the context. And so I hope this week you've gotten to know God. And today, we're going to step into our next phase of this series, step 3, part 3. And I want to talk to you today about a super touchy subject. I want to talk to you about how to be known and loved in the church. See, we live in a generation where people come to church, and I'm so glad that you're here this morning. I want you to come and worship passionately. I love seeing you lift your hands. I love seeing a tear stream down your face. I love when you have a moment with God, and I want you to know God, but I want you to know that as we get to know God, we fall in love with the things that he loves, and he loves his church. He's passionate about his people. And so we're going to talk today about what that looks like, and I want you to understand that the New Testament uses this word, one another, 100 different times in 94 passages. The Greek word is allelon, which is funny because it sounds like all alone. And yet throughout the passages it says one another. We are not following Jesus just personally. Once we follow Jesus, we become part of the body of Christ. And these one another verses are important because they show us what it looks like to actually be a part of the church and known by the church. And I want you to have relationships with people who can know you and love you. And I'm going to talk about how we get there. But there's a couple of different things we see with this word allelon. 1/3 of the time, that word is used in the New Testament to deal with church unity. Passages like Marc chapter 9, these won't be on the screen. Be at peace with one another. Don't grumble among one another, John chapter 6. Be of the same mind with one another, Romans chapter 12, and we'll be there here a little bit later in the message. This is what this word is all about, coming together and being in unity. And then another 1/3 of the time, so about 30 times, the word is used to stress and instruct believers to love one another. Passages like 1 John say, love one another. In Galatians 5, it says, through love, serve one another. It says, tolerate one another in love. Ephesians 4, some of you, that's where you're at. I just tolerate each other in love. We're not to the deep love yet of serving, right? And then about 15% of the time, it stresses humility. Serving one another through meekness, through humility, through a humble spirit. And then there are just random verses instructing you not to lie to one another, not to defraud one another, not to steal from one another. But the major portion of these love one another's are focused on the church loving each other and serving each other and getting to know one another. And so I want to turn to one of those passages that I just mentioned, Romans chapter 12. And I want you to see with me what God expects of his people. When you come to church, I hope very much that you have a relationship with God. But once you begin trusting God, and we're going to talk about what that looks like, you realize that he has a passion not just to change you in how you live your life for yourself, but he wants to transform the way you view the world. Because before Jesus, here's how we view the world. It's all about me. I get what I can out of the world. I make all I can. I enjoy all I can. I do all I can for me and mine, and it's all about me. This is actually the American dream, to live and prosper like it's all about you chasing prosperity in the dream. But the gospel is countercultural. It says, no, it's not just about you. You turn your life over to Jesus, and he redirects your passion. He says, it's not about you. As a matter of fact, the least will be the servant of the most. Like, the best will be the servant of the most. Like, you want to be in Jesus' kingdom because here we serve one another. It's not just me looking out for me and you looking out for you. Like, you care deeply about your neighbor. You care deeply about your enemy. You love passionately those who sit next to you, and you know the people in the church and you love them. And if you're here for the first time, I understand you don't know everybody in the room yet. But as we become Jesus, like we become more and more like him, we have a love that he has. And Jesus didn't walk this earth falling in love with beautiful scenery. I love hiking and I love camping and I love traveling. But y'all, I don't bleed for the mountains. I bleed for people. I love people. I go deep for people. Do you know what I'm saying? Jesus didn't walk around looking at all the money and all the wealth and all the power. That when Satan tempted him, he offered him this power and this political power and this fame and this fortune and all these things. And Jesus said, that's not why I'm here. That's not what I'm passionate about. And so if we are Jesus people, we should be passionate about what Jesus is passionate about. Absolutely. living righteously, turning away from sin. But that's not it. That's not all there is to it. A lot of us turn the gospel into this, stop doing bad, start doing good. The gospel is all about loving one another as well. Paul used that word over and over and over to stress the importance that we are to live this out. Do you know what the world wants desperately to see? They don't want to just see somebody who stops sinning and starts doing good things. They want to see true, real love. Love that is compassionate, love that is humble, love that doesn't boast, doesn't envy, love that is more than just noise, as Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians, love that is genuine. And so in Romans chapter 12, I invite you to read with me. We're going to start in verse 1. And you know the first few verses, they deal with us. Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. This living sacrifice means an ongoing death. Guys, as long as I'm here on earth, there's this death that continually happens. You know why? Because this flesh, this body of mine, it constantly wants to do things that sometimes aren't in my best interest, don't honor God, aren't good for me, aren't good for others, are hateful, prideful, selfish, mean-spirited, lustful. You know what I'm saying? And so there's this idea that when we follow Jesus, there's always this death because I'm saying no, and it doesn't feel good. I'm turning away from the things I used to embrace, living my way, abiding by my rules, no one else's. I'm saying, God, no, I'm choosing your way. And there's this ongoing, in a good way, death that represents the death that Jesus offered freely for us. But then verse 2, he says, he takes it a step further, do not be conformed to this world. He says, don't let this world shape you, mold you, tell you how to think, how to live, how to act, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. He says that by the testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. He says, be careful what you let in your mind. You should be renewed in your mind. And we are renewed by spending time in God's word, spending time in prayer, spending time in worship. It's a constant flush, man. Our brains have to be constantly cleansed because I don't know if you notice this. My brain picks up a lot of trash every day. I don't have to look far. It used to be you just had to be careful when you were in certain places. Now your phone is always putting stuff in your mind. If it's not ideas, it's pictures. If it's not pictures, it's videos. If it's not videos, it's your friends that you should be happy for, and suddenly you're jealous. Like there's things constantly being placed in our mind by the world. He says, don't let the world shape how you think about yourself. Don't let the world shape what you think is true and what is real and what is not. He says, the renewal of your mind. Verse 3, for by the grace given, and this is where he turns a corner, to me I say everyone among you. See how it was you? Now it's everyone among you. To not think of himself more highly than he ought to. This is the basis of love. But to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. We live in a world where people do not think of themselves soberly. I am right. There is no error in my thinking. I have no wrong. I have nothing to turn from. Verse 4. For as in one body, we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. He says, your body is different, but it works together. Your hands are uniquely shaped and different than your feet. Your nose does not do the same thing that your heart does, but they need each other and they work together. And he's using this illustration on purpose. Can you imagine if one day your hand just decided it no longer wanted to be a hand, it wanted to be a foot? If your foot no longer wanted to be a foot, it wanted to be an ear. It does not function that way. It's not created to do that. Like, we've all been there, right? Maybe you're a little tired. I get up every night. I don't know why, but I wake up and I get a snack and I'm a little dreary, I'm a little droopy, a little sleepy, and I trip a lot. I don't have full control. He says, your body works best when it works together. Another illustration of this is every time you are in pain. What does your hand do when you're in pain? If you have stomach pain, somebody hit you in the face. Your body cares for itself. You ever notice that? Like your whole body functions for itself. When you're in pain, it shrinks together. Your body loves itself. It doesn't like when another part of the body hurts. The church should cower and shrink and get together when somebody in the church hurts. When there's a need, we shouldn't say that's their problem. You should say, no, this is the body. This is our problem. This is something we want to help with. The problem that many of us have with being known is we don't really understand what it means to be known. And I want you to be known in the church. I want you to be loved in the church. And when I say those things, I know that it's a touchy subject because some people are here this morning, you've been hurt by other Christians. I'd love to tell you that when we follow Jesus, we're all like Jesus and we're all perfect and we all do everything right all the time, but I've been hurt by Christians. I've been hurt by pastors. I've been let down. However, I want you to understand, we are not perfect. We are broken people. You have hurt people and I have hurt people, but we should never allow that to stop us from doing what God calls us to. Look, I've been to some lousy restaurants. I still go out to eat. I've had terrible service at places. I still trust people to take care of me when I walk into a place if that's their job. Some of us got hurt by one or two churches and we've decided that Jesus' church is broken, that it can't be trusted. Now listen, people are broken. But Jesus' church, when it operates in a healthy way, when there is accountability for leaders who make mistakes and hurt people, when there's accountability for people one another to one another, this one another thing goes deep. It actually works. So I want to talk to you this morning about the 4 levels of relationship that I heard when I was a young man. I heard this growing up in church, and it's still true today. See, a lot of you, the problem you have with the church is you want to jump right to the deep relationship of the church. People come into our church all the time and they say, we love it here. We've been here 2 weeks. This is perfect. We love it. We're going to get right involved and you love us and we love you. And I always am a little hesitant because I'm afraid that they don't really know us. They don't really trust us. We don't really know them. And so I want to talk to you about the 4 levels of relationship. Number 1, you have to know people first, right? Before you marry someone, what do? You go on some dates, you get to know them. Right? Before you ever get close to somebody, you have to get to know them. You have to spend time talking with them. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Some of you, this is the first time you've gotten to know God in His Word. This is the first time you've gotten to know other Christians in group. This is the first time you've gotten to know other believers by coming to church on a regular basis, getting to know people, talking to people. And that's the first step. And the first step is the important step, and it takes time. Some of us want to skip through this step, but I want to remind you that the most healthy relationships spend a lot of time getting to know someone. The second step is trust. Right? When you get to know somebody, within the first couple of weeks, you realize, number 1, all right, not only do I know them, I kind of like them, I feel like I can trust them. But if you're having lunch with someone, if you're going out with someone, if you're dating someone, if you're thinking about starting a business with someone, if you're thinking about joining a job with someone, if you're thinking about hiring someone, and you get to know them and you realize you can't trust them, it's over. When trust isn't there, you say, okay, I know them, but that's as far as it goes. When somebody says, do you know so-and-so? I know them. That's it. You're not close because you can't trust them or they can't trust you. There's no trust there. And we got to spend time here too. Like you don't trust somebody after 2 weeks. Say, okay, I feel like I trust them. Let's see how much I trust them. Let's see how much their trust is reliable, or is it just something they're putting on a show? And the more you get to know somebody, the more you realize whether or not you can trust them. You've known them for a year. You've known them for 2 years. They're dependable. They're on time. They are where they say they're going to be. When they say they're going to show up, they show up. When they say they're going to help, they help. When they say they're going to do something, they do it. And then it moves to a 3rd level, and that's love. And I'm not just talking about romantic love, though that can apply here. But when you really know somebody. See, I meet so many people who fall in love and they're like, we just love each other. I do marriage counseling. On the front side, when I marry somebody, I encourage them to go through marriage counseling. We got this great book. It's way smarter than me, and it asks questions that are just hard. And I've counseled couples before, and I just ask some simple questions in the first session. And I always tell them, hey, I want to hear 2 good things about your future spouse and 5 bad things. And when a couple can't tell me 5 bad things about their future spouse, I say, you guys don't really know each other. I say, well, they're just perfect. No, you don't know them. I mean, every married couple in here right now is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Did you say 5 times 5? 500. When you know people, right? But some of us want to skip the knowing part, and we want to jump right into love. You got to know them. You got to trust them. You got to love. This works in every area of your life. But trust, once it's broken, you got to go back to the beginning, don't you? You got to kind of start over. But love isn't where it ends, and a lot of us, that's what we think. Well, I just love somebody. No. Love is a feeling. Love is passion. Love is an emotion, and love is a choice. Absolutely. We've made vows to each other when we're married. Somebody say, how do I know if I'm married to the right person? Well, if their name is on the marriage certificate, you're married to the right person. Like, you made a commitment. Like, John Piper said that, and it's absolutely true. Like, too many of us are like, well, I don't know. No, you committed. At this point, it's a choice. Feelings change. Love is a commitment inside marriage. Now, but that's not where it stops. The 4th level is where we want to get to, and that's serve. Here's what I mean by serve. Serving is where not only do I know them, I love them, I trust them, I will do things for them that aren't contingent on them doing them back. Because I know I can trust them. They won't take advantage of me. I will bless them. I will love them. I will be generous to them. I will do things for them I would never do for someone else because I know they're trustworthy and I know they love me and they only want what's best for me. You see, a bunch of us, we jump into church and here's what we do. We want serve. Like, I want to serve and you want to serve. And I want to admit to you, look, we want you to be a part of God's church. This morning, we're starting Life Track during the 11 o'clock service. We want you to get to know our church. We want you to know what we believe. We want you to know how you can make a difference. And we want to get you involved serving. But what I'm talking about here is not just serving on a serve team. I'm talking about a deep level of service to one another. Remember, we're talking about one another. And when we serve one another, and not just in a trivial way, not just every once in a while asking how you're doing, but we love each other. We go out of our way to care for each other. When they're sick, we bring them food. When they had a child, we make sure that we sort of meal train for them. When they're under the weather, when things aren't going well for them at work, we send them a text and let them know we're praying for them. When we actually serve one another and begin to love one another in this deep way, this is the promised land. This is where we want to get to. This is beautiful. This is the relationship that all of us want. Because when we think about our lives, we always have this picture in the future of us having this healthy relationship with friends who are awesome, who love us, and we love them, and we love hanging out with them, and we love spending time with them, and we know they've got our back. Like, that is the level of relationship we want here, but it takes time. And so I don't know where you are this morning in the realm of Jesus' church, but here's what I want you to understand. Sometimes it takes some time to know the church. You come for a while, and some of you, that's you, man. You've been coming, you've been kicking the tires, attending worship, and we want you here, absolutely. But then you start to say, man, I trust this place. Like, they have really good processes for our kids, and I'm going to tell you, we care passionately about safety for kids around here. Man, our leaders are background checked, and they're not just like safe, they're good at what they do. They love your children. They're passionate. We don't just throw people in kids because we're putting bodies in there. We want people who want to be in there, who love teaching our children about Jesus, about what God's word says. And so you get to know us, and then you begin to trust the church. And then you begin to love the church. You find yourself like, man, I love going there. And it's not because of the building or the kids' process. It's because your kids have friends here and you have friends here. And you trust them. And you'd never say it because you don't want to be one of those weirdos. But you love people. And you love seeing them. And before long, you're like, man, I want to serve. I want to serve these people. I want to love these people. Here's the real kicker. This is how your relationship with God works. There's a moment at the beginning where you know God. A decision one day that you make. You say, I'm going to trust Jesus with my life. I'm going to get to know God. I'm going to do my best to follow his word, to follow his ways. Maybe it was during an exciting moment in the service and you felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit. You said, I'm ready to give my life to Jesus. And you said, I'm ready to get to know you, God. And then you get to know him. Man, and that's where the real work begins. Because the more you get to know God, you realize, whoa, I got some stuff I need to work on. God wants me to be like his son Jesus, and I'm not that loving. I'm not that generous. I'm not that easy to get along with sometimes. I have some issues with forgiveness. And Jesus said, if I'm going to forgive you, you should forgive others. And I'm like, whoa, I want your forgiveness. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know that I want to forgive others. So knowing is hard, but then trusting is hard too. And that's where a lot of us really struggle, isn't it? See, it's one thing to give your life to Jesus, but it's another thing to trust him with your life, like the everyday life. Like, I want to know you, God. I want to go to heaven, but I don't know if I trust you to do what's right by my kids. So I'm going to, I know what your word says, but I got some ideas too. Well, I know what your word says about giving, God, but I don't know if I can trust you with my money. God, I know your word says I need to be like in a relationship with you and going to church, but I don't know if I can trust people because people have hurt me, God. Like, I need to keep them at arm's length. So I know I need to know people, but not really know people, God. And so what we do is we say, God, I trust you, but this much. God, I trust your plan, but this much. And trust is so hard. But here's the good news. You keep knowing him, you begin to trust him. He comes through, and suddenly it's not even hard. You're like, man, of course I'd trust you, God, and I really love you. I really understand you. See, love comes with knowledge and trust, and then before long you're like, God, you've done so much for me. I want to serve you. What can I do with my life, God? How can I serve you? How can I serve your church? How can I serve other believers? And you begin realizing that God has given you gifts and abilities. And so I'd love to read to you about those right now in Romans chapter 12, starting at verse 9. Now, he's still coming down hard. He's saying things like verse 9, he says, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to with what is good. Verse 10, love one another. There it is. With brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Right? Step up your game when you love each other, when you serve one another. Verse 11, don't be slothful in zeal. All right? But be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. He says, be fervent. Be passionate. Verse 12, rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. This is what God wants from us. More than he wants us to do all these things that are big and showy, he's like, I want you to do some soul work, some heart work, and it's going to lead to some work amongst one another. Be patient in tribulation, constant in prayer. Verse 13, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Whoa. God, have you seen my house? God, I'm not the most hospitable person. He says, seek. Not all of us are given the gift of hospitality, but we should do our best to be hospitable, to be loving, to be generous to one another. We have expectations of our serve teams around here. Now, not all of our serve teams are guest services. Guest services are the people who are like natural. They were born smiling. You know what I mean? Like their face hasn't come out of that smile yet. They're just born and they're always smiling. They're going to break their face. They can't frown. We have other teams around here, and they're also expected to be loving and to be hospitable when people come in. Like we don't want people who just walk by people and don't talk to them. We don't want people on our serve teams or as our staff or leaders around here who don't love people. Like when I see people, it doesn't matter who they are. I want to talk to them. I'm going to do my best to embrace them, to love them, to be hospitable to them. Now, y'all know that I struggle with like small talk. So don't be offended if I talk to you for like 20 seconds, okay? After I walk away, that's all I had. I have nothing else. I have no questions. It's only going to get awkward and weird. It's happened over and over. So make sure, look, we're not saying everybody's guest service is level of friendly, but you're hospitable. Verse 14, bless those who persecute you. That's where we draw the line in trust. God, I can't do that. And do not curse them. Verse 15, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Verse 16, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Our church, like every church, we have teams, we have ministries, we have all kinds of things we do in the community, and I absolutely want you to do those things. I absolutely want you to serve Jesus with your time, your talents, and your treasure. But if we miss these things, if we miss what Jesus is calling us to in knowing one another, then we've missed the mark. I want you absolutely to go through Life Track, be involved in God's church, serve on a team, but I want you to love the lowly. Did you see that? Be in harmony with one another, don't be haughty, but associate with the lowly. I don't ever want to come into this church where we look at somebody and say, I don't want to talk to them, they're not on my level. I don't want to hang out with them, they're not on my level. They're not as smart as me, they're not as rich as me, they're not as background as me, they're not as cultured as me, they're not as cool as me. Y'all, when I see that, nothing turns me off more because that's not Jesus at all. If you are too cool for the lowly, if you are too smart for the slow, if you are too good for other people, I just want to tell you right now, this is not the church for you because that is not Jesus' church. Jesus' church is here for everyone. And there are people that absolutely I don't connect with much. I don't have the same talents as them. I don't have the same passions as them. But we're going to love them. We're going to spend time with them. Never be wise in your own sight. Listen, our church has never had it together. We don't know what we're doing. We can't believe we have our own facility. We can't believe we're still here 3 years later. But Jesus will build his church. And so we're going to do what he's asked us to do because guess what? He's still building his church with weirdos and broken people like you and me. Be not wise in your own sight. I don't care how much God continues to bless our church. We will never say we have it figured out because I don't know what's going to happen next. But I know this, when God's people do these things, there's no limit to what God can do. So absolutely, I want you to go through Life Track. I want you to join a group. I want you to get to know people. But if you do those things and you're still too cool for other people and you're not actually serving other people and you don't really care about the people in your group, I want you to hear me. That's not the love Jesus has called us to because that's not the love Jesus offers us. When we get to heaven, Jesus is not just going to be this figurehead that we never encounter, who's way too important for us, who he's just glad there's billions of people up here and he doesn't know their name. Jesus offers us a deep and personal love in spite of everything he knows about me. You only see the best of me because I'm a pastor. Jesus knows the realest of me. The most broken and vulnerable parts of my heart, Jesus knows every bit of it. And when I get to heaven, he's not going to avoid me. He's not going to run to more important people. He loves me passionately and deeply in spite of all the things I've done to wrong him and to embarrass his name. So if that's the kind of love he has for me, that ought to be the kind of love that we have for one another. So week 3, my challenge is a little more simple, but it is hard. You're not going to like it. Some of you are going to wish we had the challenge of turning your car off. My challenge is to get to know each other. Listen, if you're a first-time guest, we don't expect you to know everybody's name or to get to know somebody over on the other side. But after service, we'd love for you to go to our Connect Center and find out more about our church. That's all we ask. But if you're here and you're a part of our church, you need to get to know each other. Like, I've been saying it for 3 years. You need to join a group. It's not one of those things where it's like, well, I'm not that level of Christian. There are no levels of Christian. Like, are you following Jesus? Let's do it. Let's follow him. Let's do what he said. Let's love one another. Let's get involved in each other's lives. Used to be, I'd hear you be like, well, Pastor Marc, there's not one that's with my... We have too many groups now for you to be like, there's not one that fits my schedule. They're out there. Join a group. Schedule a meal. After service, hang out. Don't run. First service, y'all ain't got lunch to be at anyways. I know what time it is, all right? Y'all can't use that excuse on me, right? Relationship happens in the margins. You get to know people at your work when you stay late. You get to know people at the community center when you're not on the exercise machine, you're hanging out by the water fountain. You get to know the parents at your kid's school when you get there early and you stay late. Relationship will always happen in the margin. And if you want relationship at church, you got to be in the margin. You got to be the person who between services hangs out in the hallway and gets to know people coming to the next service. You got to be the person who doesn't run to their car but actually hangs out and starts talking to people. And what you'll find is there are people like you. There are people who want to love Jesus more, who want to be passionate about the community, who want to make a difference. And here's the deal. They love you and you love them, but you got to get to know each other first. And our problem around here is not love. Every American wants to love somebody, wants to love everybody, wants community. It's margin. We don't have time for the relationships we say we need. Introduce yourself. Now, I already hear some pushback, and I can see it in your faces. Pastor Marc, I'm an introvert. Okay, listen. Let's be blunt. You don't believe it, but so am I. I was terrified of public speaking as a kid. I am way better at this than one-on-one. I'm not allowed to talk to first-time guests, and some of y'all think that's not a thing that we do, but I accidentally did it last week, and it went really awful, really bad. I asked the 3 most embarrassing, like, it's just stupid. But here's the deal. I don't hide behind that and say, well, Pastor Marc's an introvert, so he doesn't go to group. I go to group. I know people and am known by people. Well, Pastor Marc's an introvert. He can't be in the lobby after. I'm around you people, all right? And you know what I sense? That you're a weirdo just like me. You're broken just like me. Y'all have problems just like me. Some of y'all are extroverted, and that's great. Some of y'all are introverted, and that's great. I'm not asking your Enneagram number. I'm telling you, get to know somebody. Introduce yourself. I love that we are so forward these days. We know every little thing about ourselves. But here's what you need to know. Regardless of who you are and how uniquely, and I get it, different you are. You've been through our spiritual gifts test and you came back as like number 2 on hospitality. I'm not outgoing. I get it. But this verse still applies. This is non-negotiable. This is where you actually grow. You want this. You just don't know how to get it. You desire this kind of community and relationship. You just don't know how to get it. And some of you are so scared of doing the most simple, mundane things. So the good news is, man, you can listen to your music this week. You can have your phone at your table this week. But my week 3 challenge for you, if you're a part of our church, get to know each other. Spend some time together. If you're here and you don't know God, I would change it this way. Get to know God. Take the first step and know him. Say, I'm ready to trust you. I'm ready to give my life to you. Follow your ways. I'll do my best to trust you. I hope to love you. And who knows, maybe one day I'll trust you and love you enough to serve you, God, but I'm ready to start where I am and know you. So this morning, who do you need to get to know? What's your next step in this challenge?